Hello, this is Kairo the Cat. Welcome to Formula One Philosophy, a podcast for Formula One lovers and race car enthusiasts alike. I'll be filling in for that stupid dog producer Gatsby, who is missing in action once again due to his inferior dog-like demands. Today's episode will be the final rant from my media-hating owner Nicholas, his final therapy of all the things he finds wrong with Formula One. As you know, his mental growth on this podcast has brought him to love everything about Formula One once again, so therefore the last litter he needs to kick around will be his relationship with Ferrari. Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen. Nicholas has much on his mind. As always, you can find this podcast on YouTube at F1 Philosophy and Instagram at F1_philosophy. Take it away, you silly human. Thanks for cleaning up after me and feeding me while I sleep all day and terrorize you and the house.
That was surprisingly honest of you towards the end, Kairo. So you do it on purpose and knowingly? You destroy the house, you run around, terrorize us, you meow all the time, and you know? Jesus. Cats are a lot smarter than I give them credit for. That was really funny, though. I'm going to kick the litter around one last time. Okay. You're a clever cat, you know. Cats are very bright, but they are annoying as hell. But yeah, as you said, producer Gatsby, MIA again. This is an audition, producer Gatsby. Keep note. Kairo, for everybody who's wondering, was born in Egypt and rescued by my girlfriend. And he's a monster and a horrible cat and just something no human being should be forced to live with. Yet here I am. But thanks for that wonderful introduction, Kairo. You might be given a second chance in the future. As Kairo did point out, today I'm going to be talking about Ferrari. This is the elusive final therapy I've been mentioning for the last little while. It's about time. Sean and I have a bit of a break right now due to scheduling conflicts. We have the autumn break again, the ridiculous 3-week break in the schedule that makes no sense after they have a summer break. I'm not going to talk about how the season goes on too long because, quite frankly, it's giving me a job by going on this long, and I'll only have 3 months off, and still Sean and I will have a lot to talk about in those 3 months off. So I'm not going to be too upset about it, but it is kind of weird. I think we can all agree with that. But yeah, today, the episode's probably going to be a eulogy for Ferrari. That's what I'm going to entitle it. A eulogy for Ferrari. As a former superfan. Someone who loved Ferrari. Loved Michael Schumacher more, but definitely had an affinity to the team that brought me so much joy as a kid when I started watching Formula One. You've lost your way. And I was thinking about keeping this for after the end of the season. I was hoping to have this therapy at the end of the season, but I think it just makes more sense to have it now. Because it doesn't matter what Ferrari does the rest of the season. It doesn't matter if they win 2 or 3 of the next 6 races. It doesn't matter if they get second in the constructors or somehow manage to pull off a miraculous feat and get first. And as I'll talk about, the driver's title's out of reach for them no matter what happens. But still, I don't think it matters anymore because it's not going to change my opinion on what they've become. If they manage to win something in the constructors, it's nothing to do with a long-term success regimen that they used to have. They've become something else. They become a team that doesn't represent me anymore. And as Sean has pointed out, and I've pointed out too many times, yes, I am partially Italian, half Italian in my blood. But it doesn't represent Italy as much as they think it does. And it definitely doesn't represent me. And I'm not going to sit here and just have loyalty and blind faith to a team just because they say they're Italian. There's nothing about them that's Italian. They're not exactly independent. They're not run by Italians anymore. The team principal's French. The owner's half Swedish. He was, I think, born in Italy, but he has a Swedish father. I think he might have even been born in Sweden, the Elkan family. And yeah, a lot of the people who work the day-to-day stuff, yeah, sure, they're Italian, but Italy's lost its way politically in the national team of soccer, football, calcio. It's not exactly Italian these days, not playing the old Italian style. And Ferrari's no different. Just because you call yourself Italian, just because you're scarecrows who put an Italian jersey on or a Ferrari jersey on and claim that that represents Italy, doesn't mean we need to support you just for being Italian. There's no blood tied to that. It's still a scarecrow. It's still something that is filled with hay and feathers. It's not the blood of what it used to be. It's not the representation of what it used to be. It's just something with a jersey on, showing this pride and arrogance as if it still is what it used to be, clinging to old hopes. You aren't you, Ferrari. You aren't Italy. You aren't what you think you are. I'm going to lay the case out, and this will be, like I said, the last therapy, unless I pull a Rolling Stones and keep saying it's the final tour and come back 20 times with 20 more therapies. Sean will probably die of an aneurysm or a heart attack in that case, so I'm going to try to avoid that and say this is the last therapy. The last ever therapy, where I bury Ferrari finally. Because there's still parts of me that cheer for them. There's still parts of me that feel a little joy when they succeed. And it's time to put that to bed finally. I want to get one thing out of the way first. This isn't me shitting on them for what they did to Mick. This isn't even necessarily going to be what I think they did to Michael Schumacher, Mick and Michael Schumacher. I'm not going to talk much about that because that's neither here nor there in what needs to be buried. But I will say the last and final straw was what they did to Mick. And you can sit there and say it was Steiner. You can sit there and say it was Haas. You can sit there and say it was Mick's poor performances, which I don't think he had as many as people think he did. And as we're seeing now with what's coming out in Haas, with Steiner, with Komatsu talking, Mick was definitely never the problem. It was always Steiner. I think Mick wasn't perfect, but he was definitely not as bad as what Steiner made up him to be. I think Steiner, even before the Saudi Arabia crash, had made up his mind that he didn't want Mick. There was some rumors in the media going before the 22 season saying how Steiner, once he got rid of Nikita, was trying to angle to get rid of Mick then. Trying to say, I want the team I used to have back. We're flush with money now. We don't need Uralkali. We don't need the Mazepins. Why should I keep Mick as well? And they might just be rumors. But I think there's something to that because we saw that unfold over the season. The second Mick crash in Saudi Arabia, if you believe what Drive to Survive was putting out there and what Steiner was putting out to drivers to survive, he was ready to go after Nico then. He was ready to sign Nico then. Before the Monaco crash, before the Miami crash. And we know Gunther's strong ties to the media. And I'm bringing this up right now because the media is going to be a big portion of why I have this talk. But we know with Steiner's contribution and connection to the media that he was definitely putting stuff out there. And people like Will Buxton were eating it up on his lap. And Will Buxton going out there saying, if the car can score points and you can't score points, you don't belong in that car. I always remember that comment so vividly when he was talking about Mick, and it was just like, you could say the same thing about Hulkenberg the year later, and you didn't. You could say the same thing about many drivers in many situations. You could say that about Oliver Bierman now. If the car is a race-winning car and you're coming 7th in the Ferrari in this beginning of the season, what does that say? Does he deserve a seat? What about an F2? If Antonelli is winning races, getting consistent points, and Oliver Bierman is struggling to come in the top 10, does that say anything about his performances? I think it was just they were eating up what Steiner was talking about. They were trying to portray a narrative on him to get him out. And that I blame Ferrari for, because Ferrari should have stopped it. Ferrari should have been doing what they're doing with Bierman now and saying, this is our future champion. This is our future. This is who we believe in. That you gave up on him is complete nonsense. And you should have done it for Michael's case. I outlined that in the first therapy. Michael did everything for you. Michael gave up time in his prime, titles in his prime, money in his prime. Yeah, you gave him a buttload of it. But he could have chased title after title, sponsorship after sponsorship, gone from team to team, leveraged his services for 15 years. And he didn't. He didn't. He stayed at Ferrari to help Ferrari win, to bring that legacy back. Yeah, also to bring his reputation as the guy who brought them back from the dead, which was a hard feat. Yeah, he did it some for himself. But he did that for you too. And you clung to this nationalistic idea that this is Ferrari, this is Italy, we do it our way, where there's no one bigger than Ferrari. There's no one person bigger than Ferrari. You saw that with Charles Leclerc. He said that about Adrian Newey. It says and Vasseur said the same thing. We said we didn't care to get Newey. We didn't cede to all his demands because we prefer the unit of Ferrari over Adrian Newey. And when they said that it became pretty clear to me that they're too far gone to ever come back. Yeah, it's probably an excuse. Yeah, he probably never wanted to live in Italy. Yeah, there was probably a long shot he ever worked for Ferrari. But you should have pulled out all the stops to get a better designer for Ferrari because you're clearly lacking something. You're clearly up and down. You're clearly inconsistent. You have been since 2008. 2008 was the end of the era that Michael left behind for you. And unlike, say, Mercedes, when Michael left at the end of 2012, and for 2013, yeah, he left him that car, which was great. But Mercedes was able to jump into a new era with, yes, a lot of the work that Michael gave, as they said. But they were able to jump into a new era and all the regulation changes from that point and all the rule changes from that point on in 2016, 2018, times like that. They were able to do it flawlessly because they were well-funded, well-organized, well-engineered. You're none of those things, Ferrari. You need all the help you can get. You need that winning mentality back. You can't just sit here and tell us you're doing great and that you're so close every year using the media. That's why I brought up the media to begin with Steiner. Using the media to tell everybody you're 1 year away. You're so close. We're Ferrari. It's going to be next year. We're building to a future. Remember Binotto in 2019? We're building for the future. That's why we're getting Charles Leclerc. And then you got caught with some sort of cheating scandal, which we'll find out eventually. And you said, okay, we're building for the future. That's why we're going to get rid of Sebastian Vettel. And in a few years, we're going to be able to compete. We're getting rid of Sebastian Vettel for Charles Leclerc. And then the time came to compete, and you pooped your pants. With the best car in 2022, at least for the first half, like I pointed out before. I'll just say that at least the first half. I think for most of the year, you had the best, if not a close second. Because Charles Leclerc still had quite a few poles toward the end of that season. You still blew it. You still lost 16-3 to a team that had no idea what was going on at the beginning of that season. To a team whose engine combusted. I'm talking about Red Bull. Twice in the first three races, where Ferrari had a complete advantage. 16-3 to a team that was in disarray. Max had just won a controversial title, was getting asked about it all the time. Red Bull didn't win the Constructors that year. And Ferrari's looking really strong and looking like they're going to dominate this first half. And you turn around and you, with your golden boy driver, destroy yourselves. It wasn't just Charles spinning in Imola, giving all the momentum to Red Bull, which really changed the season. Red Bull gets a 1-2, and they're back. It wasn't the two engines combusting in Azerbaijan and Spain when you had a win in the bag, 20 seconds ahead, pit stop ahead. Those suck. It happens, but something similar happened to Red Bull. It wasn't just the horrible strategy calls throughout the year where you got laughed at the entire season, where people start calling it pulling a Ferrari whenever somebody fucks up. And it's interesting to note that Daniel Ricciardo and V-Carb had some horrible strategy this current year in 2024. And Laurent Mekies came directly from Ferrari, so that's just interesting. Ferrari seems to spread its cancer throughout the F1 paddock. You lost so badly that it became clear that one team and their main driver had a winning mentality. And your team and your golden boy, who's supposed to be the best driver in the paddock, according to you, we see the article spread out throughout 2023 saying, poor Charles Leclerc, look at all the poles he's getting. He's the best driver in the paddock, but he's just at such a bad team like Ferrari, poorly run team. Unlucky is the constant theme. Maybe he's a little unlucky, yeah, maybe. But he went all in with Ferrari too, and you went all in with him. And this symbiotic coexistence is killing both of you. Neither of you have the winning mentality right now. You seem to win when nobody expects you to win, which makes you an underdog. It makes you the also-ran. It doesn't make you dominant. It doesn't make you the best. You have to act like winners. You can't keep losing from winning positions. And just because you clip some wins from losing positions doesn't make you great. Doesn't mean you have long-term potential. It means, like what we saw in 2022, when the pressure's on, when you're expected to win, you won't win. I go after Charles Leclerc a lot, but he's the perfect embodiment of this. Him and Binotto fed off each other. Binotto kept just pushing it forward. Oh, it's long-term. When they fell flat towards the end of the season, and Mercedes, who was having the worst season they could ever imagine, who was disgusted in themselves. You caught the constant interviews with Hamilton, Russell, the entire Mercedes team was miserable. Toto Wolff calls the 2022 car one of the worst ever, puts it in the Mercedes company museum to say, this, look how bad it can get. This is an example for us to always show how bad it can get. We can always do better, and it can always go bad. Like, they hated 2022 and almost caught Ferrari, who declared it a success. Binotto declares it a success. 2022. We finished second. We finished third the year before. You should have been just as angry as Mercedes, if not even more angry, if I believed you were ever going to win, if I believed you ever wanted to win. And Binotto took the fall there and resigned, but it wasn't all him. And he needed to be in engineering, I think, but you needed a figurehead who had a winning mentality. And who did you replace him with? The guy from Alfa Romeo? It's nonsense what they're doing here. It's nonsense what they're doing. And he's, of course, a Charles fan, and you keep making Charles happy. But Charles Leclerc will never be a champion. It's pretty clear now. I've made this comment a million times. I made it a couple weeks ago. I said Charles Leclerc is excellent at finishing second place. That's who he is. That's who he'll always be. His 2 wins in 2024, Sean pointed it out. Monaco, no one could pass. He got pole. Great. But because no one could pass him, he wins. And in Monza, another thing Sean was brilliant to point out, Charles went against the strategy call. Charles was against going long. Won the race and celebrated like he was a hero. And that's fine. Take your celebrations when you can. You're not going to get many of them. But it just shows he doesn't really know how to win. He's just sort of along for the ride. That's not the Ferrari way. You gave up on the guy who was closest to that, Sebastian Vettel, in 2020, for this kid. And it has not worked out. And instead of acknowledging the mistake, this is now his 6th season at Ferrari. You only gave Vettel 5 before you gave up on him. Instead of acknowledging the mistake, you keep doubling down on him. We need to give Charles a better car. We need to do this for Charles, this and that for Charles. You could give him the best car, like we saw. He already had it. He already threw it in the garbage. A lot of it was his fault. Ferrari didn't, and the strategist didn't spin out in France. Ferrari didn't spin out at Imola. Ferrari didn't have Sergio Perez within a second in Singapore 2022 with a 5-second penalty, and Charles couldn't keep it within 5 seconds. That wasn't Ferrari's fault. That was Charles's fault. You keep babying him. You keep coddling him. Sean made the comparison that Charles is the Hakkinen of the relationship. They need to treat him delicately. But he's not even Mika Hakkinen. Hakkinen had races where you're like, oh my God, that was amazing. We haven't seen anything impressive from Charles Leclerc since his first season at Ferrari. where he did overachieve. He was a little bit better than Vettel, but he was also treated more favorably too. They believed in him more than they did. They had already given up on Vettel. He's the perfect embodiment of what's wrong with Ferrari, because they would rather have this face and they would rather use the media to tell you how good he is. And they would rather double down on their beliefs than to actually do what's needed to win. You have to make the tough calls in order to win. It was a tough call to get rid of fan favorite and your beloved Jean Alesi after 95. A lot of people said you were crazy. Michael was overrated. Michael was a cheater, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he was the double-time world champion. He's never going to do that at Ferrari. And the knives were out for him early on when they realized how bad they didn't even realize how bad the Ferrari was. They blamed Michael early on. Till Michael did that magnificent win in Spain, having no business winning, that they finally were like, oh, maybe we should trust him. But it took 5 years from that point for him to develop the car. You don't have someone like that. You don't have someone with that winning mentality. And if you think that's going to be Lewis Hamilton, I've already pointed this out a million times, it's not. He's going to be different. He may win with a good car, but he's not going to help you develop it forward. You're not going to have a long-term winning structure. You're taking a guy who's going to be 40 and hoping he still has the resolve and the pace of someone much younger. Michael came to Ferrari in his prime when he was 25 or 26, or I didn't even remember, actually. It's probably closer to 30, but Michael came in his prime in his 20s. If you think you're catching that lightning in a bottle with Lewis, you're not. It's the opposite. It's very different. I don't want to say the opposite, but it's very different. So you better hope you have a good car for Lewis. Because we saw with Mercedes, in 3 years, they haven't really moved. It's not all Lewis's fault, but he's not that kind of guy. But you need to make that tough call right now. You need to find a champion, splash the cash for that champion, and go forward with that champion and bring the pieces around him in order to build a successful team. Realistically, you should go after Max Verstappen right now, because we've seen the results in Red Bull. He can develop around a car. He can develop around a good core. He can develop around a good organization. You need to bring those pieces in. Michael brought his crew with him in 96. And you eventually won and had a dynasty. You need something like that with a Verstappen. You may not get that with, say, Lando Norris if he pulls off a win this year. And I'm going to say it here. Maybe Oscar Piastri could be that guy someday if he wins with McLaren. Let's see. To be continued with him. But you're not putting really the pieces in order to win. You're just getting the also-rans. You're bringing a medley of people, none of which have a winning mentality. Is there a lot of people in Ferrari that have been there for the past 18 years that haven't won? Sticking with them isn't going to win. Are you bringing crews from Mercedes? Are you bringing crews from Red Bull? Are you stealing and poaching those great engineers? I don't think you are. Red Bull and Mercedes are going back and forth with each other. They're two winning mentalities there. They want to win. They don't apologize for winning. They don't care how much they're hated. Like Mercedes, they started winning in 2014. No apologies. They just kept doing it. 8 years in a row. A civil war between Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton, which was horrible PR. They kept going forward. They kept doing it. They kept pissing everybody off. You need to do that again. You need to get back to that point again. You need to be the Renegades. You need to be the Ross Brauns, Michael Schumacher, winning races that were very controversial, like winning in the pits, doing whatever it took to win. Like in British, and I'm talking about the 2000 British Grand Prix, where Michael had a 10-second penalty, but he crossed the line in the pits before taking that stop-and-go penalty. Yeah, is it naughty? Probably. walk the fine lines. You need to go for it. You need to be the team where everybody is shocked that you do anything to win. Not sitting there, going through the media, trying to get everybody to like you, trying to get the media to paint glowing pictures of you instead of doing what it takes to win. You need to be hated. You're not going to be loved on the way up. Nobody is when you're at the top. Nobody's loved at the top. Heavy weighs the crown. You don't just do these steps like a witch's potion, like a witch's brew. If you put like a X amount of this powder and X amount of that powder, and we just keep doing that long enough and stirring this pot, we're going to get a championship. No. You got to go take it. You got to be fierce. I don't see that in you. I see a bunch of quote-unquote lovable people working hard, doing the best they can. The underdogs. You don't want to be the underdogs. Look at McLaren. How's being the underdogs working out for them? They're in existential crisis right now, trying to figure out how to be winners and dominant winners. It took some time. But at least it only took them a fucking season in a position of power. Half a season, quarter of a season. You've had 18 fucking years to figure this out. And ups and downs. Positions of power, positions of strength. Fernando Alonso leading by 40 points in 2012 and losing. Fernando Alonso needing to pass Vitaly Petrov for 30 laps in Abu Dhabi 2010. Can't do it. That's not a winning mentality. I could sit here and blame Alonso. I'm not going to. He's a problem, but he was also a product of the environment around him. He's not exceptional enough to overcome it. He wasn't exceptional enough to take that win. He just lost. Because the losing mentality had already sunk in as the second Michael left. And Raikkonen struggled to win in Michael's car. Did, thankfully. And Massa got shafted 2008. Yeah, but you still won the Constructors. But since then, it's just been downhill, hasn't it? And it's never going to change until we see the moment, the unpopular moment that you fire somebody who needs to be fired. Fired someone who everybody loves because they're not winning. Get out there and get rid of the driver. Get rid of Charles Leclerc. That's how you win. You're not going to be stuck with Hamilton for 3 years, who's on a decline. It's not looking good for him to win a championship there. I hope the car is good enough, and I hope he still has got enough resolve. He's looking a lot better than he was at the beginning of the year. But it's not looking great. And Hamilton, if he doesn't win, will just become that long list of drivers who are hated, who were former champions who couldn't just could not pull it out. While Charles Leclerc will keep getting worshipped. But Sean made a point that all of Ferrari's champions were hated except Schumacher. And I disagree, and this is part of the reason why I'm finally have had enough with Ferrari. That I think Michael was hated too. All those years ago. I think he was. I think that's why Ferrari let a lot of rule changes happen in 2005 to their detriment and to Michael's detriment. It was an excuse for them to offload him. To slowly get rid of him. To slowly tell him, hey, take a look at the exit door. That's why they went behind his back too in 2006, signed Raikkonen for 2007 when he wanted Massa. I think they've hated all of their winning drivers is what I'm getting at. Because as to what I talked about first, the mentality of Ferrari to them is more important than winning. The Ferrari name, the Ferrari brand. And when instead they should have the mentality of winning. That's what allegedly Enzo Ferrari believed. And I don't know. You can ask Sean about that. We'll ask him one day. He disagrees with that. But they used to have a win at all costs mentality when Enzo was there. Even if they lost, it was try to find a way to win. There was some stubbornness, like Sean pointed out, with the way the engines were. But it was win first. Not be liked. Be the best first. Who cares if everybody hates you? You don't have that with this crew right now. You don't have that with Charles Leclerc. You don't have that with Fred Vasseur. Who's your main engineer? Not exactly doing amazing. And are you building towards something again? I don't know. This may age badly. I don't care, though, because 18 years on since you've last won, you don't seem any closer to the bullseye, do you? And I can't trust you anymore. I can't trust that you're that team. I have to give up on this team for the list of mistakes. 5 years of Fernando Alonso watching the car go up and down, and then down unbearably. And then you get rid of him, which was a good idea for Sebastian Vettel, who slowly starts building up that car, making it a lot better than it was at the beginning of that turbo hybrid era. And then you get rid of him when he has one losing title fight in 2018. He was close. It took Michael 3 or 4. But you gave up on him right away. Instead of bringing someone like Leclerc, if you want to offload Raikkonen, and realistically, they should have kept Vettel and Raikkonen until it became clear they couldn't. But instead of bringing in Charles Leclerc, you should have bought a clear number 2. And Sean and I have talked about this a million times. 2 number 1s leads to problems eventually. McLaren's going through it right now. They've coalesced behind a clear number 1 eventually. But next year, they're up for some big problems. But you went through that first. Instead of letting the man who developed the car for you for 5 years try and go for as many title fights as he wanted, you dropped him. And that really pissed me off. Because come 2022, had you have just waited 3 more years, Sebastian Vettel would have had the best car. And Sebastian Vettel, with the best car we know, dominates. Charles Leclerc, with the best car, falls apart. That was the second to final straw. And the final straw was what you did to Mick. Third to final straw is what you did to Michael. After everything he did to you. Stop trying to use the media to tell us how great you are. And just start winning. Nobody trusts the media reports anymore. This is why I started the podcast, is because we can't believe a single thing that comes out of mainstream F1 media anymore. If you believe mainstream F1 media, Charles Leclerc is the best driver on the grid. Most polls. Max Verstappen's just an arrogant baby. Lewis Hamilton's washed up. When Lewis was the best, they worshipped him. George Russell's the future champion, according to F1 media. Alex Albon, same thing. I'm not here to debate any of that right now, but it's safe to say none of that's really true. So instead of trying to be beloved by those types of people, using the media, trying to be liked by the media, trying to be the champion everybody likes, be the champion everybody hates. That's what you used to be. That's how you used to win. Then I'll start supporting you again. But I don't think that's in you, is it? I don't think that's what you want anymore. You would rather have you would rather be one of the elitists, the top 3 teams Sean and I have talked about. Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull dominate the sport right now. Between them, there's 9 teams. And there's about to be 10 because Alpine's given up their own engines. But between them, they dictate the rules, they write the rules, they dominate the sport. They're the top 6 cars. You would rather be in that club where you get to control the damage limitation, control the damage done to you by Mercedes and Red Bull, and be this icon of the past that never actually wins, than to do what it takes to win. Go after Mercedes and Red Bull. Piss them off. Be hated. Don't control the narrative. Take what you need to take to win. Do what you need to do to win. Don't wait for it to happen. It doesn't just happen. Charles Leclerc keeps talking about that. We're working towards something. We're building towards something. We're doing the right things and one day it'll happen. No. That gets you to a point. Eventually you have to have a killer instinct to take some things, to take the trophy. This is tough love, but this is the last love I give you. Look at the results with other national teams. Williams trying to cling on to hope for England for many years. It destroyed them. They're finally giving up on that now and just trying to find the best of everybody. Working with Mercedes to try and come back up. That could have been you. That could have easily been you. Renault. Alpine. How's that working out? You know? They clung to the past. They clung to this belief that their shit didn't stink. That they didn't need to do the things that needed to be done. That we could just skate by on our past and one day we'll find a winner. One day that icon, that beacon of our past will bring the best to us or it'll just happen by doing enough of the right things. No. Didn't. You're getting to that point, aren't you? 19 years next year since you've won. Since you won the driver's title. Or I guess, 18 years next year since they've won the driver's title. 17 since they won the constructors. You're getting to the point where Ferrari was in 95, where it was almost getting embarrassing. But you don't have the system and the people in place to stop this losing streak. You don't have a Michael Schumacher. So that means it's probably going to be 40 years until you win. Because if Michael never came, that would be 79. Do the math. That's 46 years next year. 46 years. Could easily happen now. And I don't think enough people do this because a lot of people say, no, I'm just abandoning a lost cause, abandoning the losers to cheer for the winners. No, I'm not cheering for the winners. I'm not supporting someone just self-immolating. You don't support a heroin addict just because they were once the greatest or drug addict. No, when they are on their way down and when they're self-destructing, at some point you got to let go. And you got to say, hey, I love you. I do. But you are not doing what's right. You keep making the same mistakes and you're going to get worse. And you're going to keep hitting the same wall. You're never going to learn. You're never going to get better unless I let go. Like I said, this may age poorly. They may be one step away from championships. But based on what I'm seeing, they just keep making the same mistakes. Keep pushing the same narratives. Keep having the same beliefs. I have two examples as someone who grew up in the orbit of Toronto. I live in the Greater Toronto area. The Toronto Maple Leafs and the Toronto Raptors, hockey and baseball. And the Raptors for many years banged their head against the wall. The basketball team, Toronto Raptors, banged their head against the wall with two bad players. And they believed that one day they could just win a championship with those two. They were that good. They were building towards something. Even though it was clear that they had obvious deficiencies, that they weren't good enough to be the best. The Toronto media and the Toronto people clung to them. But then a brash general manager came in, traded one of the fan favorites. Everybody knows what I'm talking about, DeMar DeRozan. Even though everybody loved him, even though everybody believed he was their best player, even though from an unbiased position, you could see that he was a negative on the team. And when they traded him for a genuine superstar, Kawhi Leonard, the next year, Toronto won. the next year. Sometimes you just need to get rid of the negatives. Charles Leclerc is the negative. Fred Vasseur is the negative. Carlos Sainz was the negative. Yeah, you got rid of him, but he wasn't exactly a problem, was he? You should have never signed him. He now looks the same as Leclerc. Looks very similar and equal. You're saying, oh, look, he did nothing wrong, like Eddie Jordan says, nothing wrong to lose his seat. Yeah, but he should have never had it in the first place. And the fact that you were willing to offload him so quickly when he was equal to Charles Leclerc means you never believed in him too. He was supposed to be a number 2 driver, yet he eclipsed Leclerc. Yet you don't want to give up on Leclerc. At some point, you're going to have to pull that trigger. If you want to win. If you want to win. I don't know. There's no evidence that you want to win. There is evidence that you want to be loved. There is evidence that you want to be wealthy. There is evidence that you want power, but there's no evidence that you want to win. And I'm not here to support power-hungry psychopaths who make money at all costs. I'm here to support winners. Even if they're in losing positions, even if they're underdogs right now, if they have a winning mentality, I believe in their future. If Aston Martin gets rid of Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll, I'll definitely start cheering for them right away. That's the only thing that's holding me back. But that organization's acting like they want to win. It's great. I like Lawrence Stroll. I like Adrian Newey. I don't like their drivers. They're trying to hire a lot of great engineers from other teams. That's a team that wants to win. They're not clinging to the British flag or the Canadian flag. No, they're doing what it's taking to win. And once they get rid of Fernando Alonso, they will. And Lance Stroll, but they're never going to get rid of Lance Stroll, are they? The other example was the Toronto Maple Leafs. A team where everybody just supports blindly, believes in it's always going to be their year, they're this close, loves and worships their players even if they're deficient, even if they're not that good. Make heroes of these average players. Talk about it all the time. Does this sound familiar, Ferrari fans? Italian people who cheer for Ferrari? Blind devotion. It's coming. It's a matter of time. Yeah, we haven't won in a while, but we're almost there. And like clockwork, when it matters, the Toronto team loses. The Toronto Maple Leafs lose. I don't support the Leafs. I'm an Oilers fan. I don't really care about basketball. So this was easy to me to watch with an unbiased perspective and not really care and just come to logical conclusions about what I saw. And for many years I was blinded by Ferrari, but when I finally stepped back, I realized there's nothing there, is there? There's just a lot of talk, a lot of blind faith and belief, and a whole lot of losing. That's why I made a big deal of that whole Charles Leclerc as the Mother Maria in Drive to Survive. Because if you need to pray, if you need to treat him like a deity and you need to hero worship, something Sean and I talk about a lot, you're in the wrong. It's never going to really happen. There's no real belief, is there? There's empty faith. The second someone else comes along and seems a little bit better, you'll cheer for them. When really you should be demanding that Ferrari brings the winners in now. Does the hard work. Makes the tough decisions. You should stop cheering for them no matter how bad they actually are, no matter how much they keep losing. Third last year in the Constructors. 1 win. And this year it's probably going to be the same. Third, maybe if they're lucky, second. A collapse from Red Bull, not a resurgence from Ferrari. Still nowhere near McLaren, who in 18 months came back to life from 9th place. Ferrari's already fallen behind McLaren. Ferrari will consistently now be the 3rd best team for the foreseeable future unless Red Bull keeps fucking up. Then great, you're the 2nd behind McLaren now. Nothing's really changed, has it? Ciao, Ferrari. There were some great times. There were some great fucking times when I was younger. the late 90s, even the early 2000s, even parts of the 2010s. I saw Vettel win in Australia 2017. It was a great win. Saw in Canada 2018, Vettel win again. I wasn't trying not to cheer for Ferrari because it was Sean's birthday, but couldn't help myself. But it's gone. Those magic's gone. I don't have that childlike awe for you anymore. I don't have that childlike blind faith. You've ruined it. And because I am willing to disconnect from that blind faith and introspectively think and be a philosopher, wonder why I named the podcast F1 Philosophy. Think and deduce and have logic and analyze my values, I realize you don't represent any of them. Now it's to the point where if you win like this, I'm still not going to support you. You need to do something where I think, wow, that took guts. That was amazing. That was ballsy. That was different. Like I said, if you win like this, doesn't matter. It's still empty. You'll just lose again very soon. You won't build a dynasty. You won't build a fierce winning machine like Mercedes did for 8 years, like Red Bull is doing right now. Winning even when their car is falling apart. That's not you. When your car falls apart, you sit there and complain in the media that's not good enough. You struggle to finish in the top 10. Yeah, Red Bull's kind of going through that right now, but at least they dominated the first half of the season. And they'll be back next year. You watch. They'll be fierce next year. They may not win, but they'll be fierce. And you'll be that timid little baby lion constantly playing with his father, whose father pretends like you're fierce whenever you bite him, but realistically he's just treating you like a kid. Treating you like something with potential in the future, potential you never realize. You never are going to become the king of the jungle like this. So I can't in good conscience support you ever again. F1_philosophy at Instagram. F1 Philosophy at YouTube. And F1philosophypod at gmail.com to join the Fantasy League if you're so inclined. 6 races left in the season. You're going to lose if you do. Sean and I are way ahead. So we'll just keep pushing that for next year. I hope you accept my final critique of Ferrari. To all Ferrari fans, I'm sorry. I will happily have any of you on to discuss what I'm missing. I will happily listen to an argument as to why they're going to win soon, why it's a matter of time while they're going to become a dynasty. But based on what I see now, I do not see it. Tell me why I'm wrong in the comments. Ask to come on the pod, you will be allowed on. But until that time, stop blindly supporting Ferrari, if I may give advice to you guys. Stop blindly believing it's going to happen, because if you're from the Greater Toronto area like I am, like the Leafs, it never happens. Or like the Raptors, it takes a bold decision. So think about that, guys. We'll talk to you next time.